Did you know that the face melt scene at the end of Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark, is actually 100% biblical? That's right. In this video, I'm going to show you 3 different passages where the Ark of the Covenant actually kills people. And then I've got one special verse that I'm holding out for the end that describes exactly the face melt scene. It's pretty amazing, so let's get into it.
I may never march in the infantry, but my feet are firm with the gospel of peace and the sword of the Spirit at my right hand.
I may never ride in the cavalry, but the belt of truth and the breastplate of righteousness are my defense and security.
I may never shoot the artillery, but I will take up the shield of faith and extinguish the deceiving darts of the devil.
And I may never fly over the enemy, but my mind is protected by the helmet of salvation.
We are the Lord's army.
Hello, and thank you for watching the Godly Rebels channel. My name is JD. If you like the content, be sure to like it and subscribe. And if you learned something, why not share it with a friend so they can learn it too? So without further ado, I want to get right into these verses and passages. The first one is probably the most common, the most popular. It's found in 2 Samuel chapter 6. So what happens in this story is they are transporting the Ark of the Covenant to a new place, and they built a new cart to put it on and everything like that. And I'm going to pick it up in verse 6 of chapter 6. And when they came to Nachon's threshing floor, Uzzah put his hand on the ark of God and took hold of it, for the oxen stumbled. Then the anger of the Lord was aroused against Uzzah, and God struck him there for his error, and he died there by the ark of God. I feel pretty bad for Uzzah because he just wanted to help, really, it sounds like. The oxen stumbled, the cart kind of shook a little bit, and Uzzah put his hand up to kind of hold fast the ark. But God is very clear on his instructions that he doesn't want anybody taking hold of the ark. In fact, when it's describing how to build the ark, they're told to build rings on the sides of the ark where they can put poles, and then they would have one person on either end or 2 people on either end of the poles that would carry the ark that way, so nobody would be touching the ark. God is very clear on that. So for the next example, I'm going to go back to the first book of Samuel, also chapter 6, but verse 19. And in this chapter, it's the same thing. They're transporting the ark from one place to another, but something different happens. It says, "Then he, God, struck the men of Beth Shemesh, because they looked into the ark of the Lord. So he, God, struck 50,070 men of the people, and the people lamented because the Lord had struck the people with a great slaughter." You think these people would learn, right? The Bible really doesn't say anything else except that they looked into the ark. And because of that, God struck them dead. So what did they do in Raiders of the Lost Ark? The Nazis, they looked inside the ark. But of course, Indiana and Marion did not look because they had their eyes closed the whole time, and that's what saved them. Very interesting, and also pretty much correct and biblical if you think of it that way. Now for the next example, we're going to go to Leviticus chapter 10. In this story, we have the tabernacle that is built up, the traveling one in the desert. So we've got the outer courts with the altar in the outer courts, and then we have the holy place and the holy of holies. In chapter 10, verse 1 picks up where Nadab and Abihu, who are the sons of Aaron, they are doing an offering unto the Lord, but they use profane fire, and God smites them down. So I'll pick up in verse 1. "Then Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, each took his censer and put fire in it, put incense on it, and offered profane fire before the Lord, which he had not commanded them. So fire went out from the Lord and devoured them, and they died before the Lord." So in verse 2, when it says that fire went out from the Lord and devoured them, it is actually largely believed that that fire came from the ark, from within the Holy of Holies, because that's where God dwelled. That was God's dwelling place, between the cherubim of the Holies of Holies, on the mercy seat. If we actually go back just 2 verses in the previous chapter that says the same exact thing. Fire went out from the Lord. But that time, the previous time, it actually consumed the offering that was placed on the altar. But this time, however, with Nadab and Abihu, because they didn't follow the procedures and the instructions of God, God struck them dead and instead of the offering. Other translations actually say, fire went out from the presence of the Lord. I find that to be a little bit more descriptive in that it comes from within the Holy of Holies, from the Ark of the Covenant, if you will. So whether you believe that maybe a rogue meteor came down and struck Nadab and Abihu dead, maybe. I think it's more likely, however, that fire came out from the tabernacle and consumed Nadab and Abihu. So that's just another example of how the Ark of the Covenant kills somebody. So that's the third. And if we actually look at the clip of Indiana Jones, there's actually a fire that does come out from within the Ark of the Covenant and consumes the people. It strikes them dead. So now for that very interesting and very descriptive verse that I've been holding out on, it's actually found in Zechariah chapter 14, verse 12. And it describes exactly what is depicted in Indiana Jones. So I'll read that. And this shall be the plague with which the Lord will strike all the people who fought against Jerusalem. So this plague that's actually being talked about here in Zechariah 14 could, in a sense, be related to how the Nazis died because they were fighting against the Jews, even though Zechariah 14 is ultimately talking about an end times. But if we go back, just like the other examples I gave, the ark kills people because they look inside it, they touch it, they do things that the Lord doesn't want them to do. So whether Zechariah is talking about end times, I think it could still relate to anybody who touches the ark at any time. Now to continue with the verse. It says, their flesh shall dissolve while they stand on their feet. Their eyes shall dissolve in their sockets, and their tongues shall dissolve in their mouths. Well, there you have it. Have you ever read that verse before? Have you ever heard of that described in the Bible? That's exactly what happened to the Nazis there in Indiana Jones. Their face melted, their eyes dissolved, and the tongues dissolved while they were still standing there. So thank you, Steven Spielberg and George Lucas, for the attention to detail that you gave to Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark on how the Nazis ultimately met their demise. And it's just a good reminder that you do not want to mess with God. Well, I hope this video was entertaining for you, but I also hope you learned something. If you did, feel free to write it in the comments. Give it a thumbs up, share it with a friend, and let's just have fun with it. But as always, I want to remind you to stay in the Word and study the Word. Put on the full armor of God every day, and God bless.